morning, everybody. Thank you for being with us today. Today, as we said in our publications, the language of this session is going to be in English. We have a great legal firm manager that's here with us, James Perkins, who I welcome you, Jim, and I thank you for being here with us to share your experience. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here with you all.
And we also have Francisco Sanchez, who's here also from Procopio to share with us. So, well, I just want to do a brief presentation of what we're going to see today in this digital forum, and a brief presentation of Jim. This forum, we decided to call it the new model of law firm for the next decade, from 2020 to 2030. A little bit impulsed by the COVID, definitely, even though, as we've talked with Jim, well, these were already tendencies that Jim, well, in the US, being one of the pioneer countries in all of this legal tech, legal management, legal operations, obviously they were already in this tendency, but now it's a reality practically for all countries, and we definitely have much to learn from the practices that you guys have done in the US. James Perkins, he is Chief Operating and Compliance Officer at Procopio, which is a law firm based in San Diego with different collaborations and operations in Latin American countries, in Asia. Basically, Jim is, in charge of all the risk management and all of finance, human resources, administration, marketing, and basically business development at Procopio. So he's here to tell us about the non-legal, but the managerial part of how to build the new model of a law firm. So what should you expect from today's session? We're going to be talking about how all this COVID is changing different structures, how law firms should plan, and what type of decisions they should take for their teams, for their new collaboration structures. And we have a panel of questions and answers that you guys have in your Zoom menu, and you all can ask questions during the sessions in this panel, and I will be moderating the session to go asking these questions to Jim. Okay, so thank you, Jim, and I give you well, the word so you can start sharing with us.
Okay, thank you, and welcome to all of you in this new world we're living in, at least temporarily. We'll see how far where it all goes. So when I was asked to speak, the title of the new law firm models in the next decade, my thought was, if I really knew that, I wouldn't be talking to you, and I wouldn't be with a law firm. I'd be making a lot of money doing other things. But so I don't profess to have a future crystal ball here any more than most people. However, what I think I want to do today, I want to initially touch base on what we call black swan events, and I'm sure many of you might have come across that. And the COVID-19 issue was absolutely a black swan event. And the reason I want to start there is how we manage these events is very important. And how we go about learning from these events, which lead to changes in the future, is also part of what we're talking about today. So the focus really is on what is a black swan event, briefly. How does that usually change things? I want to talk a little bit about our clients. I want to talk a bit about the lessons from the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, because that was another black swan event in the world of business. And Also talk a bit about what went on with COVID and how the US law firms are dealing with it. Latin America is going through this right now. We're all in the same situation. In the US, we're probably a little bit ahead. We're starting to come back and start to reopen in the various states, our businesses. Talk a little bit about that. I'll tell you a little bit about what Procopio did. As a firm, we went into this COVID lockdown, and last week we started to very softly open our offices. Again, at least the San Diego offices. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And I think through that, it will lead us to what we've learned and how we at Procopio, and now how I see what I think are some of the leading firms in the USA are starting to change their model going forward. So that's the sort of outline of today. In many ways, it's very ambitious, but that's fine. And we are all sort of throwing out ideas here. So hopefully we'll get some good questions, and I welcome all your questions, and we'll try to answer to the best of my ability. One of my roles in the firm is not just within the firm, but I'm on various, I speak a lot to law firms around the USA, and speak at various conferences, sometimes too many times. But I'm very, very glad to be involved here today with Janet and the group. I spoke at the ANADE conference last November, early November in Monterey. Enjoyed that very much. So part of what I mentioned today, will mention a few things from that conference, because technology is a very important part of what's going on in all our lives. And that's going to be a key thing to success in the future. And I will mention that. So Procopio itself, just very quickly, we started in 1946, very small firm. I joined in the late 90s. The firm was about 35 lawyers. Today we're about 166, 165 lawyers. We began the year at 178. And what's interesting, this is the first year in 25 years we've had a dip in our number of lawyers. We have never been a firm to plan based on number of lawyers. That shouldn't be the way you grow a firm. It's all based on opportunities and the need for more lawyers. But we have had a very successful growth for, as I say, 25 years. And but this dip is a COVID dip. We always have a few lawyers leave at the end of the year, and we have a plan. We actually have a proactive plan that we review all the bottom 10% of our staff and lawyers from a performance point of view. And every year we will probably ask a few to leave, not necessarily 10%, but so this year was no exception. But we did have some leave early in the year, and we just didn't replace them because we saw what was coming with COVID. So just so you know, we are what we call an AmLaw, American lawyer, AmLaw 200 firm. That's the top 200 firms in the USA from a revenue point of view. You get into the AmLaw from a revenue. So we tend to be towards the bottom end of the list. This year, 189. That was 2019. Previous few years, about 185, thereabouts. But also, excuse me, we were number 11 in diversity. We have a very diverse firm because of our Latin America and Asian practices, which is unusual for a regional firm in the USA. Our offices are in San Diego, 2 in the county of San Diego. The city of San Diego is our headquarters. Del Mar Heights, which is just north of San Diego, is what we call our technology corridor in Palo Alto. It's our Silicon Valley office. We've just opened off in office in Orange County, Irvine, and we have a small office in Las Vegas and Phoenix. So we're very much a West Coast firm with a what I call a Trans-Pacific focus, Latin America and Asia. Those two practices together are typically about 20%, 15 to 20% of our revenue each year. So they're quite large, and they have continued to grow over the years. And many of you on the line listening or today might know some of our lawyers who travel and work in Mexico. Just organizationally, we have 9 practice teams. We cover all the main typical law firm areas of a business law firm. Business and technology, corporate securities, M&A, construction, healthcare, intellectual property litigation, labor and employment litigation, real estate, tax, and then we're focused through 12 key industry practice groups, of which 2 I mentioned, 1 Latin America and 1 Asia Pacific. Excuse me. The term black swan comes from a book, and some of you might have read this book. It's a tough book to read, but it was a classic in the world of understanding uncertainty, written by an individual called Nassim Nicholas Taleb. So the term black swan basically came from the fact that, you know, everyone thought swans were white. And then many years ago in Australia, a black swan was found. As a kid, I grew up in England, and I was a big philatelist, stamp collector. And I remember how happy I was one day where I found an Australian stamp with a black swan on. And it was, actually, it was quite valuable at the time, not that much, but for me as a kid, it was quite good. So I always remember the black swan. A black swan event is considered, because of where it came from, it was defined by Taleb as basically unpredictable, an outlier that carries an extreme impact. And if we want recent memories, we have 9/11, we have the 2008-2009 Great Recession. And also we forget, with what's going on in today's world, that the 2008-2009 Great Recession was quickly followed, especially in the USA, by the H1N1 virus. But that virus, which actually was quite not as bad, I guess is a good word, as the present one, but it was quite severe. But it was a gradual virus. It sort of crept through the country, and the number of people who were infected approached 60 million, which is pretty amazing, but the death rate was quite low, relative. So when it went through through the 12 months from April of 2009 to April of 2010, it was hardly in the press. So it was a different event. It was a sort of event we could handle because it wasn't sudden. And I think the big thing that happened here with COVID is how sudden it was, how severe the initial impact. Projections were incredibly scary. And so it was a very unique event we've just been through. And when we go through such an event, once it's over, of course, or we're into it, people all start talking about how obvious it was coming. I mean, we have amazing experts who suddenly appear out of nowhere and seem to know all about it. But no one predicted it, and no one wanted to try to predict what would happen, because we have a bias in everything we do. And this is, we call it constant blindness to randomness. And when we put our forecast together, when we do strategic planning and plan for the future, we never really consider things like black swans because they're scary. Even we can go back to the 2008 Great Recession, the prime mortgage problem, subprime mortgage. I wish they were prime, they weren't. Subprime mortgage problem we had at the time. Those banks, investment banks, they had a very sophisticated risk management department, and they would do scenarios of what would happen. And all of them, prior to 2008, would plan for a part of the housing market collapsing in the USA. And they would run their forecasts, and they would say, can we survive if that happens? And of course, they could all survive, no problem. What none of them really did was to say, what if 100% of the house market in the USA collapsed? And then also, what if the market collapsed in the UK? And what if the housing market? No one wanted to go there and plan that and even forecast that. And that's what I call our blindness to the black swan events. We never want to go look at something that bad and figure out what would happen to our businesses if it did occur, and how we would plan for it. And so when and I'll mention in a minute how we go about looking at initially planning what was going to happen once we got into COVID, and that we wanted to take some serious impact looks. We didn't want to try to persuade ourselves it would be okay. Another thing a Black Swan event does, it really makes a mockery of what I call 5-year strategic plan. In my business background, I've never been a 5-year strategic plan person. I've always felt that is really not the way to do it. A lot of those plans sit, you have a consultant come in, you spend a lot of money, you create a 5-year plan, it sits on someone's desk, never opened, and every couple of years someone goes and looks at it again. And that never has been, since technology started to become in our lives after the .com, strategic plans really need to be very flexible, very dynamic, always being updated, changing at any time because of events that happen. And that definitely is going to be the case going forward. Any of you who spend money on a 5-year strategic plan with anyone, let me tell you, you're wasting your money, just so you know. Excuse me. And then also what comes out, we have the expert consultants, and what I call the empty suits. Many experts, professionals, everyone appears, consults, and they all tell us what we now have to do. And they all tell us what's going to happen, and they all are experts. And really, quite frankly, most of them are hardly any better than the day-to-day rest of us who are getting information. But what this does do to us, it throws at us, all of us, in these sort of situations, a lot of information. And trying to find ways to process that information and make use of it is very difficult. So, part of what we have to do is to sit back and take a very logical and cool heads in how we plan our future when we're in an event like this. So, Black Swan events can really, really hurt us and make us scared and worry about what's going to go forward. So when they happen, and there's no argument here, COVID-19 was what we would call a Black Swan event. The impact of the highly improbable, no one foresaw this. Although there has been discussions in the past, and some of you might have seen certain movies and films about what would happen in such situations, but no one wanted to sit and plan this event from the point of view of how we would manage our firms. Managing through a Black Swan event and coming out the other side is not easy. So I like the idea, and I've seen it described various ways, and we do it a certain way at our firm. But I saw an article recently written out of the Harvard Business School group, and basically I like the way they presented it because it's really what we do. And what you should be doing is first, your first reaction is to what I call protect the core. And meaning you've got to take care of business. How do we survive? What have we got to do to get through this period and come out the other end? And then typically what happens, most businesses don't really look at new opportunities until they're through that. They want to, don't worry me, don't let me, the management sort of like, oh, we're worried, we've got to deal with day to day here. I don't want to discuss the future. But actually, this is the time to also, in parallel, discuss the future, because through this, you will see things we have to do differently. They will be opportunities for the future. There are opportunities in the marketplace you must not be afraid to look at, review, analyze, and if it's a good opportunity, take. And so the way that it was phrased in this article, I quite liked. We have to protect the core, and we then, at the same time, we pivot to new opportunities. And so I stress to all of you in this time, while obviously we're all very focused on making sure we get through the next 6 months, we also need to be looking at opportunities. And so that comes in many different ways, and I'll discuss a few of those. I'll throw one out right now. One of the things we obviously see, our expenses were dramatically cut when we went into COVID early March, middle of March, because we weren't doing things. We weren't traveling, we weren't putting on events. We weren't taking clients to dinner, to lunches, et cetera, et cetera. And so there was a big immediate reduction. And I'm sure you're all seeing that. And the way to deal with that is when we start to come back, and whenever that is, to what we might call the normal, or whatever is going to be the new normal. I hate that phrase, but it's a good, I can't think of anything else right now. Then you should look at the way you run your business as if you're starting a new business. Don't just go back to the way you were doing things, the events you were planning, the travel you were doing. And I throw out this 50-50 rule. Basically, whatever you are spending money on, and let's take travel as an example. When you look at 2021 budget, look at it as being 50% of what you did. Because there is no doubt what we're doing today is a great example. We've all become very quickly technology conversant in, for this particular event, Zoom, and there are other virtual platforms. And this is going to continue for a while. And I think we're going to learn a very valuable lesson here, that we don't have to be wasting our time driving to the airport, sitting on a plane, flying somewhere for a 3-hour meeting, and then getting back on a plane, having dinner, waking up with a headache, and then getting to the airport again and flying back. Very unproductive process. Now, you will still need to do that in many occasions, but not at 100% of what we were doing. That's just one example of what I call zero-based budgeting, when we look to come out of this. And you should be looking, as I say, one of the things we are protecting the core. What is it today, tomorrow? We have to protect, we have to make sure we get through this. But also we should be looking right now at how does our 2021 budget look? What are the things we're learning that we know we're not going to have to spend money on? How can we use the virtual technology we're learning to reduce that and still be effective? Our clients will look to that. Our clients are constantly looking at us to be slimmer, be efficient, and obviously pass on some of the savings to them, as well as ourselves. So that's just an example. So as I mentioned, we should also right now be looking at opportunities in parallel to making sure we're saving the firm. I know that sounds a bit sort of incongruous. We need to save the firm before we look for opportunities. No, let's look for the opportunities at the same time, because they are there. Now, law firms, when we look at change, we are going to be talking about change today and what we see the new model being. My history has been, and in business, not just in law firms, is businesses, not too many businesses are happy with dramatic change. Gradual change is really more suited to most businesses, what I call incremental change. Law firms especially don't like dramatic change. So, you know, so historically, and I'll mention a bit in a second what we learned from the Great Recession, law firms are not prone to embrace change, especially not fast. But we've got to stop being what I call glacial. I mean, we have to move with the times better than we've been doing it. And we have to speed up our, what I call gradual incrementalism in how we change and look to the future. The legacy, some of the legacy stuff we do is dragging us down. And another little strategic tip, which we use at our firm, is, and especially even in this time, this is an interesting time. And I think what's more important is you still try to manage the firm and think of things as you did prior to COVID. We can't be in a panic mode all the time. But one of the strategic things I like to talk about is, you know, most of our day or most of our week is focused obviously on what we're doing today. A bit of what we're talking today about is the future, a bit of a long-term future. You know, if you look ahead 10 years, that's quite long in today's business world. But you should also be looking back. What are some of the things we've been doing in our legacy that we've got to get rid of? And you must give some time to that thought process too, because sometimes many of those things are what drag you back when it comes to change. And, you know, and technology is driving us very fast here. And we'll get to that in a minute. So, and obviously today's world, we're looking at actions, decisions we've got to take care of. right now, and we'll talk a bit about how we're dealing with that. I do want to mention one thing. This slide isn't about a lot to do with clients. It just reminds me to mention clients. Law firms, especially in the USA, we're very good at all getting excited and talking to ourselves about how we think the industry should go. What we don't do is talk to our clients more and understand what is it they're going through, what is it, how would they like us to see us going forward performing. So when we look at the future here and we look at the use of technology, we look at maybe becoming more remote with our working force, and how that's going to work. Talk to your clients about how do they see it. Do they want us to be a more remote virtual law firm? Don't they care as long as they get their delivery of their service? So, so as I say, this just reminds us to work with your clients through all of this. They like being asked how we should run and what we're not doing well and what we need to do better. So this is just, as I say, just a reminder. But while I'm on it, we definitely, this is some of the things we did at Procopio the minute we went into COVID for our clients. Obviously, we created our own COVID-19 group of across partners from different practice areas to quickly get up to all the issues to do with how the government was going to help. And in the USA, I know that's not true necessarily in Latin America, but in the USA, the government has poured a lot of money into helping businesses through COVID. A lot of government programs. And so we had to get people up to speed. Our clients wanted to know how to deal with that. That's one big thing we've been doing. Our technology training group offered out to our clients, can we help them? Complimentary. We weren't going to charge them for anything. If they needed to, how to set up remote working, how to use Zoom, how to use other meeting Zoom. And we offered them training. And a lot of them didn't want to take us up. They had their own people, but quite a few did. And we helped them a little bit, even if it was just a 1-hour consulting program. And again, we offered that free. And the other thing we did, we created a little managed services for clients operation, where many of our clients will only have 1 or 2 people as their in-house counsel or people responsible for legal services, external, and can we assist with them? Can we help them at a very dramatically reduced rate to our typical rates for our clients? And the biggest thing we did, which is, I think is going to be a driver for the future, this is an old slide. It says webinars for clients. It's something I did a couple of weeks ago, 13 completed to date. We've done over 30, 35 major webinars, podcasts for our clients. In the early days, they were focused on the COVID issue and how that was impacting our clients. But recently, they're now embracing certain different subject matters. We've become experts in webinars where we did them before COVID, but really, not many here and there. That is, I think, it's going to be a huge plus for the future. And I think another way we're going to become more virtually focused on business development. And so anyway, that's just mentioning clients and think of how you can help your clients through this, not just regular legal services, but help them through this phase 2. I'm just going to mention technology because technology is not a major discussion in detail today, and I know you've been doing those sort of programs every week with Janet. This is a slide I showed in Monterey at the ANADE conference, and it was just my way of showing where we are with technology at that time. And technology has helped us all, certainly in the USA, to become very efficient and very effective, reduce our staff lawyer ratios ever since really 2008, 2009. So we've used technology, what I call in the back room, to help us become far more efficient. Good example of that, for every lawyer we had in Procopio in 2011, we had approximately 1.5 other staff members. Today, we have 0.9 other staff members. So if we were at the same ratio today as we were then, I'd be spending another $10 million, $9 to $10 million a year on staff, which we're not doing. Technology in the back room, better software, better end user, so nothing, not artificial intelligence. We're not talking artificial intelligence here over the last 10 years. Has helped us all be very more efficient. So when in Modera, I said, we don't know where the curve is going to be going as far as the speed of which we adopt technology in the USA. I will tell you that what COVID has done is push us to the top dotted curve. A much faster focus on technology and adoption of technology is already going on, given what happened with COVID and what now we're having to do with our operations. And then a lot of it will start coming into what we call the front room. So that's just mentioning a very simple thing. Technology has been important. It's now going to be increasingly important as we go forward. And even more so than I think I certainly thought last October. Just to give you, this is another slide I showed then, but it's just a reminder of the annual expense for technology in US law firms. And this is just from an 18 survey. I'm sure 19 numbers, I haven't seen them, but I've got them. I haven't looked at them. I didn't do a slide, probably no different. And what you see is the black is the hardware and software expense on an annual basis, and then staff, the staff as a percent of yearly revenue. So you're really looking at something like 2.5% to 3% of yearly revenue of what I would call, this is the AM law firms. So I would say firms from 7,500 lawyers and above, typically. But you know, smaller firms sometimes have more of a fixed cost. And this is whether you're spending in the cloud or whether you're spending by hosting your own systems. That number is going to go up. And as we move remotely, and I'll talk a bit about that in a minute, of is that really going to happen? Then this spend will go up, but it's critical, because as this goes up a little, and I would venture to say you can add 1% on this, you should be on in the next couple of years, then, and maybe more, then other expenses should be coming down to offset it. So that's just a reminder of what we talked about in Monterey and the sort of expenditure on technology. And it's, if you spend it well and wisely, it's absolutely essential, and it's going to increase. Sorry, went backwards. Before we talk a bit about change, we think it's coming out of the COVID, let's just see what lessons we learned from the Great Recession. Because after 2008, 2009, law firms were being told massive change was coming to the legal industry. And I have a joke when I talk to networks and law firms about management issues. And I say there's only two types, it's a lawyer joke, right? There's only two types of lawyers. Those who don't like change and those who absolutely detest it. And, you know, it is very difficult to have lawyers change. And one of the reasons is they really never had to. I mean, you know, things were fine and we had events, and why rock the boat? Things are pretty good. Why do I have to change anything? And that's not a bad reason, to be honest. So anyway, when we went through 2008, 2009, it was a big shock to the legal industry, as it was to every business. This is what hasn't happened in COVID yet. At that time, something like 8% of all associate lawyers in the USA lost their jobs. That hasn't happened in COVID. And we'll talk a bit about what has happened. And that hasn't happened yet. Hopefully it won't happen. So in many ways, to the law industry, 2008, 2009 was also a serious hit. So coming out of it, and I just graded what I think was really happened. 1 means no change has happened. 5 means there was a great change in a specific thing. So the consultants were all being told the billable hour is dead. Now, as you know, in the USA, we pretty much still bill and charge by the hour. I mean, we do a lot of fixed fee work, but it's still not the majority. It's the minority. And we track our hours, and which everyone has to do, but we bill it to the client, and then the clients argue about the bill, and we end up giving them 5% discount, and we start again, right? I mean, that's still very much most of what we do. But the consultants were telling us the billable hour is dead, which I've never understood, because if everything you did was what we called an AFA or a fixed fee, you still have to track your time. Because if you want to understand the profitability of any project, you still have to track the time you spent on the project. You have to know the cost of the people who spent the hour on the project. So I always thought this was a really stupid statement, to be honest. The billable hour is dead. However, having said that, not much changed. So I give it a 2 out of 5. There wasn't much, we're still doing very much the same. Certain things have changed a little, but not much. We still, what we call our AFAs, alternative fee arrangements, fixed fees, cap fees, blended rates, all sorts of different arrangements with clients. There was a quick rise after 2009 in those matters. Then they've sort of plateaued, and they've pretty much plateaued at the 20 to 40% of matters for most general business firms in the USA. If we talk only about intellectual property, patent prosecution, for example, that has become virtually 100% fixed fee. We're starting to see M&A deals are pretty much fixed fee, but it's still only a third of our firm matters. So that really didn't change a lot, despite what people were saying. In the USA, our associates, have had what we call salary lockstep. Every year they move from one level to the next, and the next, and the next. The prediction was that was all going to change, dramatically change. Never did. Still pretty much the same. I mean, there's some nuances, but it's still the same. What did change, an increase in number of lawyers to the classic secretary ratio. I know certainly in Mexico, things are done a little differently, more efficiently, I think, quite frankly, than in the USA. But and that did happen. And that happened because of technology. Technology allowed us to become far more efficient. The technology moved from what I called the back room into the front room. So secretaries and attorneys could do more themselves at what we call the end point. And so that helped reduce the support level required for the lawyers. And as I say, we have in those days, we were about, for every, we're secretary-wise, not just all staff, but secretary, we were 2 to 1. We're now 5 to 1 today. It's quite a dramatic change. And that's typical of most firms in the USA who I would regard as leading the way with efficiency and effectiveness. And our ability to deliver a great product to the client has not changed. And in fact, I'd venture to say has improved. And we're seeing a lot of movement from what a classic secretary in the USA was to a more what we call a practice assistant who bills some time and has to be far more technology savvy than 10 years ago. There was a big comment that we were going to see more mergers, a lot of mergers in the USA. Well, that really didn't happen. Another thing that didn't happen. The commoditization of practices, it's all going to be standard. LegalZoom's going to take over, it's going to kill us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Quite frankly, none of that happened. I mean, some has happened, but law firms have adapted to it. And they know how to deal with this very effectively. And the what we call the online virtual law firms have really not made much impact at all. Certainly not in our world. And we don't see that as really going to impact us. What we see as the impact is our competitors. And we in the USA, in Procopio, a lot of our competitors are the big firms, national, global firms. And they are spending a lot of money on technology, and their goal is to be very efficient. They can move into our marketplace because our rates tend to be lower than theirs. So that's happening. That is happening. I'd give that a 3. And did the law firm model change? We're talking about the next 10 years. Didn't change. I mean, it's still the basic same way we look at profitability, the same way we look at realization rates. There's a classic sort of model I showed at in Monterey: rules, realization, utilization, leverage, expense, and speed of collections. That's where the rules thing came from. They still look at it the same way. There's some nuances being applied in profitability that are different than 10 years ago, but it's still basically the same model. And certainly it did become a buyer's market. The clients are driving a lot of this efficiency. The clients are driving it. What's going to be interesting when we come out of COVID is, will clients still be driving for even more efficiency? Because remember, they are going to come out of this not financially strong. We're going to have clients who don't survive. Hopefully that isn't many. But when they do come out, it's going to be 12 to 18 months before they probably recover financially to where they were. That's not true of every industry segment, but certainly for many. In San Diego, the unemployment in San Diego right now is at 30% plus. It's about another 10%, 5 to 10% more than the national unemployment. I mean, it's horrendous. It's unheard of. And that's because San Diego area is a tourism, hospitality destination. So everyone in the hotel, restaurant business has pretty much been decimated. And how much of that comes back remains to be seen. But someone just a little jump over to business psychology. Those who've been following what's going on in the USA have probably seen in the last 3-4 weeks a strong drive across the country to get back to work. Why is that? When we went into this, and most of the states went into this in mid-March to late March, the lockdown or the stay-at-home programs, then most people who know business, most of the business in the USA is not huge companies. They are 10 to 100 employee type businesses. They can last a month. They can struggle through 2 months. They cannot go longer than 2 months and still be in business. So when you saw the 2-month period starting, that's why around the country you started to see these pressures to get back to business, because they knew another month of this, they weren't going to exist. So that's still a very awkward situation we're in. We'll see where it goes. So the issue here when we come out of COVID, will our clients expect even more reductions because they themselves are going to be financially strapped? And again, that's just what I was just adds to what I've been saying. There is one thing I mentioned. I mean, listening are probably in-house counsel. Some people in-house, not just in law firms or businesses. The Corporate Legal Operations Consortium, CLOC, in the USA. This has grown to be a huge operation. This is the legal operations people within our clients, and it tends to be the bigger clients. They have an organization where they meet, they grow. It's a huge organization now. They have chapters in the UK, Australia. I'm not sure they formed one in Latin America, but if not, it'll probably come. And what they are doing, they are driving what they expect. These are the people within a big firm who is, or client, who is the technology people supporting their in-house general counsel's department. They're the ones driving the move to efficiency, effectiveness, lower pricing, and the use of technology. And it's a huge movement. And so that's just to let you know that, and that's still going. I just expect we'll see continuous pressure on us to deliver faster, more efficiently. And if we don't do it, someone else will. So very quickly, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we are moving on.
Jim, let me just interrupt you a bit.
Sure.
We have a couple of questions, and just
sure, absolutely.
a little bit to round up on what you're saying, which is very interesting. So basically you're telling us, don't panic, we will adapt, and history has shown us that. And even though in situations of crisis, we sometimes say, oh, everything's gonna change. You say, well, yeah, things are gonna change basically, but it's not that we're gonna just have to turn around everything we've done. Even though you suggest that we do have to revise our budgets basically on every single concept and reinvent or re-question if we really are going to need these types of expenses, no? And definitely another like idea I get from what you're saying is we need to invest in our people and the people we have in building these new abilities and basically in software, no? And this main point that I think it's really important of focusing on our client. Basically, what the law firms you're saying need to do is just ask their clients, what do you need? Not only the legal service I offer, but also be this sort of counsel of saying, okay, how can I help you? No? And after, well, sort of saying this roundabout, we have a question from Angelica Tello, and she says, well, entrepreneurs and companies are focused on their business continuity. How can legal services be a real essential item or legal advice for them on this COVID or post-COVID times?
Okay, so I mean, part of this, especially if they're an entrepreneurial entity, I mean, you know, part of it is how, and this is a tricky thing, right? How do you pick the clients that you're going to help because you know they're financially not going to have a lot of money, they might need some legal help, or they might need some advice, and how do you work with them such that you are going to defer how you get paid, or you're not going to ask for the money, but when you come out of it, they'll appreciate that at the other end. It's a very tricky sort of balance, right? Where you don't go after the money per se, or you do something. It's not free, it's probably deferred, and you know, you help them. And I think the number one thing you mentioned, you ask them, can we help in any way within your skill set? You can't be doing things you're not familiar with. But we've done things like, you know, give personal protection equipment, masks, to our clients. We've had some mass purchasings we got from different places, and we've given them to our clients. That's been where, you know, because sometimes they have trouble getting some of this stuff, or they're short of the money and to get that sort of information. But we see, we're still seeing in our startup businesses activity, because they're used to running on a pretty, you know, short string anyway. They don't have a lot of money. We're still seeing some funding taking place of those events. And I just think it's trying to find, you know, lawyers in the USA and grew up as being this phrase of a trusted advisor. It's a bit of a cliche. But in the old days, I mean, it would be where the partner, the person who had the client, would be more than just a lawyer. They would ask other issues and see if they could find help. Sometimes it's connecting people. Do they have a problem with an area that we're not expert in, but we can find someone who can help them? And I think this time like this, you go back, well, we should always be that way, but in particular this time, you have to become the really, of your best clients and clients you want to retain, you do become their advisor in many things. And they're going to ask you for, you know, many different things. As I say, we've had some who asked us for training in how do I get on Zoom? How do I do virtual meetings? Others just simple, many, you know, short questions that we just answer. We're not going to charge them. We just try to help them. So I think it's tough to say is the one specific thing, because I think every client is unique, and that means talking to the clients and understanding their individual needs, I think. USA, as from what I understand, again, I don't know what the governments are doing for you in Latin America, but one thing we really helped our clients with is find them the way to get their loans or their money from the government stimulus programs that came out because they were very complicated. And so that was a big thing we did, but that might not be appropriate for what's happening in Latin America. But that was a big thing we helped all our clients with. All clients wanted to get some short-term loan that was offered under the government program. So working with them to do that was a big thing we did. So, you know, I'm not sure that's, you know, some people sometimes are looking for silver bullets in what is the magic thing we do for someone. And I just got to talk to clients, what is it, but not just as a lawyer, you know, as this business advisor is important. So, you know, hopefully that helps.
And then we have another question, a little bit more focused on the public sector, but Claudia Silva asks, what should the public sector do? Either they have to relax sometimes many of the rules the government has, or implement technology tools, or should these two go in parallel?
Well, okay, I'm trying to think exactly how I understand that, but when you say public entity,
The government.
The government.
Yes.
So are you talking, who wants to, okay, on the rule issue, I don't quite understand the rule side of things.
I would go more for the technology part, no?
With the government or working with the government as a client?
No, the government, like how should they, well, implement this technology? Should it be a priority?
If I'm in government?
Well, yeah, she said for the public sector.
Well, let me tell you, in the USA, we don't look at the government.
Lawyers that work in the public sector, she said.
Oh, sorry?
Lawyers that work in the public sector, in government.
Well, then who's going to be, good luck. In the USA, we do not look at the public sector as being technology savvy on anything. And, you know, so there is, in fact, I'll give you a good example. Right now, the courts closed with COVID, and now some of the courts are starting to open up. And the courts have never been that technology advanced when it comes to how do we do things like virtual meetings, right? They never have really dealt with this. So now they're trying to deal with it, and you can see how backward they are. They're trying to say we'll have hearings virtually, and really, I know this sounds harsh, but I don't think we've ever seen anything come out of the government sector that technology is a plus. It's a very inefficient process. And a lot of it's procurement, right? I mean, someone's got to buy the products and everything else and put the software in it. And certainly in the USA, it's a very difficult problem. So I don't think I'm qualified to answer that, simply because I'm not don't work within the public sector. All I know is that, technology is going to embrace every part of our business. And if the government is going to move to sort of having people in more of a virtual environment, then someone in the departments are going to have to decide what the standardization is, what platforms to use. But my experience is that's never going to be a problem. That's never that sophisticated. I'm not saying there isn't government departments around the country, because, you know, in the USA, we have the state, we have the local city, we have the municipalities, and we have the federal arm. We have so many, and the problem is they all use different, when they are using technology, it all tends to be different. So it becomes a very specific thing. So it's, I don't really know how that works within Latin America.
But also, Jimo, sometimes we see in Mexico that litigation lawyers that are not forced sometimes by courts to have technology, because courts themselves are not, like you say, technological savvy. They are like pretty more relaxed, but we also tell them we don't have to wait for government. to implement technology in order for, or to demand us the use of technology in order for us to start building it inside our own processes, no? But I just tell you.
Really not, no.
The
If
next
we waited for
question,
the government, we would have nothing.
let me tell you the next and last question before you come with your presentation again. What can we expect in the next years to come, specifically in legal tech area, taking into consideration the big changes in the coming years for this kind of, for the law firms?
I will get to that. So that's a question, if I can answer that, just as hopefully that I'll give some explanation to that. Yeah, so because that's something we want to talk about. So very quickly, I'm just going to highlight a few things here as I run through this quite quickly, which what happened to Procopio. So obviously, we had an Asian practice. We knew in early January that there was a problem in Asia. So because of our clients, and especially Taiwan, gave us our clients in Taiwan and our law firms in Taiwan told us their concerns of what was happening in China. So we stopped all travel to Asia in the middle of January, and we started to plan for what we thought might be. And we were probably a little bit ahead of other people thinking this way. But anyway, in the middle of March, the end of March, schools started to close. California started to decide that, it looked as though we were going to have to start doing shelter at home, shelter in place. And the first county in California that did it was Santa Clara County, which is Silicon Valley area. So they shut down our office. Historically, because of our lawyers traveling in Latin America and Asia and elsewhere, but predominantly in those two places, we developed years ago a very good, what we call virtual desktop system, where you can be in your office, you can open all your documents, you can be looking at what's going on, you can leave your office, get on a plane, fly anywhere in the world, go anywhere, whether it's at home or Mexico City, sign back on through our secure access protocol, and you'd be right back in your document. You'd be right at the page you left. It would be looking, the whole setup was exactly the same as if you're in your office. That, what we call our virtual desktop, that has been running, and we've been using that. It's highly secure for many years. So when we started to get these orders that we were going to have to be working at home, technology really came to our aid in that the only thing we had to do was train our staff, because they had never been allowed to work remotely. And they had, so it was an immediate training of them. But because of the nature of our virtual desktop, we could train them very quickly. And we probably, short of a 1 hour training session, they were okay in understanding, because the desktop was the same. All they needed was access. And what they saw was exactly the same as if they were sitting at their desk in the office. The only other addition was, the only extra stuff then was, what have you got at home? What is your home computer? Do you have a good internet connection, etc.? And very quickly we found all that out. Most of our employees, staff, we gave an encrypted laptop to, because that's how we wanted them to use and access from home. And then if they needed a bit of extra equipment, we would do that. So we very quickly moved our Palo Alto office to working from home. And within a week, the whole state went into lockdown. We were told on a Thursday at 5 p.m. that we had to be out of the offices by midnight. No more work in offices. And basically over that weekend, everyone was trained. And in about 3 days, we became a 100% virtual law firm. And it really was very seamless. One of the things we immediately did, and this gets back to my forecasting, I mentioned earlier that in a black swan event, we don't like looking at the worst cases. We immediately looked at what do we think is going to happen now with all our clients having to be locked out of their businesses. And what happens when you do forecasting, there's a thing called model risk, and it drives us to underestimate the risk. It's human nature, right? So we tried not to do that, and we took scenarios, and I briefly mentioned them here. Basically, we were going to lose 30% of our client work within 60 days. We're going to see our revenue increase. We're going to get a 40% hit on our net income. And we looked at two scenarios, very pessimistic and very optimistic, not very optimistic. They were still bad scenarios, but I mean, you know, the optimistic bad one, put it that way. So we looked at two, and basically it was really month by month tracking budgets. And the goal was we were going to have to be tracking this almost daily, as we saw the work change, and the two things really happening. And we're just starting to see it now, I'll be very honest. One is decrease in what we call demand, the total billable hours we're being asked to do. And the other was, we might do the work, but could our clients pay? So the ability for the clients to pay, we would start to see decreasing. So we put those scenarios together. One thing at the time, I'm on a board of one of the big legal software houses in the USA, and I sit on that advisory board along with about 35 other people in my positions. We're the smallest firm. They're all AmLaw 50, AmLaw 100 firms. And basically, this just shows what everyone was thinking. We do surveys of that group, and basically the impact, what did they think the impact was going to be of the COVID shutdowns and in the next 6 months, the next 2 quarters. And depending when we took in March, which was the green line here, we saw impacts of people thinking they were going to be impacted quite severely. The bottom horizontal is a significant reduction. On the left, one means significant reduction in demand and hours, all the way up to the right, where some firms saw they were actually going to gain from the shutdowns, from the COVID issue. But the green line is middle of March, the darker green is the beginning of March, and then April is the sort of the red bluish line. And the last time we did the survey, we've just done a new survey, by the way, be interested to see what it says, but everyone was really looking at something like a 40% impact on their business over the next 6 months. And that was the majority of what people are seeing. April turned out to be a bit better than people didn't see the impact. May, people are starting to see the impact. And so we're still, the jury is out on really how the law firms are going to be hit with the COVID reduction. Reduction in force, we did in mid-March, a reduction in force, 15% of staff, 3% of lawyers, hiring freeze imposed. We did a 10% reduction of all our non-partner lawyers and exempt staff, not our regular, what we call hourly staff. We didn't reduce their salary. And we did some other things. We canceled all our retreats. Unfortunately, our partner retreat was planned for, where we pushed it from March to October. And then of course, we've canceled that altogether. And that was going to be in Cabo. So we were very upset about that. That's now rescheduled for 2022. So we did those sort of things. One thing, remote working, and I just want to say this, the number one thing is the morale of everyone working remotely. We had 350 people all working remotely. And the first thing we said to our practice teams and practice group leaders is communication's essential. So all the meetings you had scheduled, continue to do them, but you do them virtually. And don't miss a date. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Transparency, transparency. The management committee, the same message. We sent the same message to partners of what was going on as we did to staff. Excuse me. No difference, you know, and keeping people informed on a regular basis. We partner meetings regularly, virtually. Once a week, we have a huddle, all staff. Everyone can get on the phone for 15 minutes. So a lot of use of technology helped us here. Excuse me. Staff Jabber chat rooms. We allow our staff to talk about management. They can have their own Jabber chat room. They can talk about us. We don't hear what they're saying. But another key thing, mental health sessions. We have an outside firm that once a week, there is a session for an hour and people can ask and they'll talk about mental health issues. That's a huge issue remotely. And I think it's going to be very problematic in the future. I'm not going to talk about cyber risk. Virtual meetings are a risk. We don't have the same level of cyber security. be careful of that. We developed our own do's and don'ts, but when you're sharing confidential information, that's something we're working very hard on, and just be careful of that in a virtual meeting. And this is just a list of some of the things that happen, and we're double careful about in looking at cyber privacy risks. Some of the practice areas that are impacted, we all know, corporate securities, M&A will be impacted more. Just starting to see that. Labor and employment has been strong. Certain public agencies, construction has continued to be strong. Intellectual property continues to be strong, but we're starting to see across the board, probably now we're starting to see a 5 to 10% reduction in demand. And what we mustn't forget is when demand starts picking back up, and maybe that's July, we will still have the tail of getting paid, and that will go on for another 60, 90 days. The weak demand will drive weak fee collections in the next 90 days, 120 days. So Monday, May 26th, last week, we were allowed to return to office, and we planned a 50% maximum group of people can be on any one of our floors. In a high rise, this is very difficult because of elevators. Forward to an elevator, we estimated only 15 to 20% would come back to our offices. It was about 15%, but they're all given a day they can come back in. It's all very planned. We have to provide masks, cleaning constantly in the morning and afternoon. Temperatures tested when you go into the office before you can go. When you come into the building, before you go up to our office, you must have your temperature tested. We're looking for machines to do that. Right now, we brought in an outside person who is there every day. And right now, San Diego and our Del Mar office can do that. Santa Clara is still closed. Las Vegas is they're still figuring out what to do there. So, we're going to be going through this for a while. And what this is going to drive is the impact on the future law firm. And what I like to talk about is do these events, like a black swan, is it going to accelerate some of our things we've been doing, or will it be what we call an inflection point, a major change in how we do something? And we're absolutely going to see, and I have no qualms on this, that accelerate is going to accelerate our technology. We've had forced technology education the last 2 months. It's pushed us years ahead of where we would otherwise be. I have partners, and I'm sure this is happening everywhere, who quite frankly didn't want to even think about having to do a Zoom or a virtual meeting, are now quite expert after 2 months. And we went through this period psychologically where I think what started initially was, oh my God, this is catastrophe. Then after a week or so, it was like, well, actually, it's not too bad. And now it's like, I quite like it. So now we're starting to see, I think I might just stay at home and work, sort of mode of operation starting to happen. So I do think we're going to see, technology, the webinars we've done, the podcasts, huge education. And it's just going to hold us in good stead going forward. An inflection point, what does that mean? Are we really changing the way we look at things? I think in the USA, you're going to see firms now go away from, having capital, but really not being well capitalized, to being better capitalized. Partnerships in the USA, as you probably know, gets to the end of the year, all the profit is paid out to the partners. Very little reserve. I think that's going to change. Right now, we're in a short-term survive first. We're still in what I call the protect mode. We've got to get out of this, the other end. And there's going to be an increase in understanding true profitability. We've played with that a little bit with that in the past. Technology-wise, cloud versus hosted. There's an interesting dialogue going on. Slowly in the USA, firms, big firms now, we're moving more to start to access cloud applications. this event has concerned them such that now there's a lot of, because what's happening is when you go into the cloud, you're paying fees for that service. Suddenly, now a lot of people have gone remotely. That fee structure changes, and there's been a lot of complaints about what are the costs now of being hosted and having, with remote workers. But in the USA, we're still not big on hosting. We like on cloud. We like the security of being hosted. An interesting discussion we had last week is the professional life extended because of the virtual environment. People are at home more, they're more relaxed, they're more comfortable. They're going to add a couple more years onto there before they decide to retire. Interesting comment, we don't know. There's definitely psychological effects of working at home, and I don't think we know what they are long term. But there's definitely going to be a move, and I see this already with the firms I talk to. So what I call the permanent flexible model. The fact that we all moved remotely and worked very seamlessly, quite frankly, in a remote mode means that when we look to the future, do we really need all these offices? Do we really need to have everyone back in the office or in a space available for them? And I think that's already going to start changing how law firms look at the future. Ourselves, I think we're going to be moving towards a more, what I call virtual traditional hybrid. If someone wants to work at home and their supervisors are okay with it, whether it's a lawyer or a staff member, we will probably accommodate. That means we'll be making investments in someone who's going to be 80% at home. We're going to be making investments in their home computers, systems, because they need to be secure and they need to be of the quality as if they were in the office. That's a little different look at how we do things. We're going to be talking about, do we change compensation models for people working at home? How do we do business development more virtually? Big challenge for the marketing and BD people. But I do think that's going to be, that will happen. We'll reduce our personal contact to some degree. But when it comes to the technology, right now, I'm not looking that suddenly a whole bunch of new systems appear or softwares appear or AI appears. We've been looking at AI, as we talked about in November, anyway, on a regular basis. You should be doing that. I don't think working at home changes that. All working at home does is focus on now these various software that involve virtual meetings, depending what platform. Our goal is to have whatever the 3 or 4 main platforms are for virtual meetings, we'll be equipped to do it, have it, we'll do it anywhere, and train all our partners and staff to be able to do that. That wherever they are, they can have a virtual meeting, and depending on the platform. And that's a training and a cost issue to some degree. Collaborative software. One of the things we're concerned about from how do you supervise young lawyers? How do you supervise staff in a remote mode? That technology helps us. You need good collaborative, I'm not going to call them chat rooms, a little more than that. Collaborative software, not email, where you can move back and forth and you can have a dialogue with a group of lawyers easily, not through email. Those systems, we have one product we really like, we're working with, and there'll be others we look at. So I think it's going to be a change in sort of software initially when you move into a remote having more people work remotely than we have historically have done. So I definitely think it's going to be, there's issues to do with how do you know what people are doing at home? Our lawyers are fine because they bill their time and we know what they're doing. If they don't bill to clients, we have a problem whether they're sitting at home or whether they're in the office. But staff, those who end up working from home more, how do we know what they're doing? Technology, once again, helps us with that.
Quick question here, Jim, regarding what you're saying on the offices and working from home. In Mexico, it is very common that the offices were very luxuries and big and nice properties in order to receive the level of clients. And that's why, law firms in Mexico are, very luxurious and nice. What are you seeing here in the US for those clients? Do they care about the actual office of the law firm, or they are more comfortable now saying, you know what, I just want to meet with a lawyer. I don't care about anything surrounding it. What are you feeling?
I don't think we know. I mean, it's too early, right? We still, remember, this issue of parallel, we're discussing here the future, but we're still all in the mode of trying to make sure our businesses survive. So this is this parallel discussion. It's a very strange discussion. You go 1 minute from, can we pay the bills next week, to another discussion of what are we going to look like in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. But it's a discussion you need to have, I think. But I don't think we have that feedback from which gets back to my point, talk to your clients. Some clients might not like the fact you are working remotely. They might perceive that there's a security issue. They might perceive the response is not going to be as fast as when you're together in an office. So there will be some give and take here, I think, with clients. But I think what I'm hearing and seeing, and even ourselves, the permanent flexible model doesn't mean to say everyone's working at home. What it means is the way I'm looking at it is it means they can come in the office if they want, but they're going to spend 2 weeks at home for various reasons. Doesn't matter. Seamless. They can work at home. Or there are certain people, and maybe it's people who, if we're going to continue to have a potential virus issue longer term, who might be more vulnerable, are going to work at home permanently, but we want to keep them. And so it's all of the above. We are flexible enough to adapt. And I think that's the important thing. We might all be happily moving along, and then next January, we might get a wave 2, and we all have to go back and work remotely again. You've got to be able to do that seamlessly, very quickly, and without a problem. And I think that's what I mean by the flexible model, the permanent. We're going to be in this permanent flexible model. And there's some advantages to that. The costs can be reduced. You don't need as many offices. Certainly in the USA, you're going to see there's been a bit of that in the past, but not a big movement. You're going to see a bigger movement. Again, this is what I call an accelerant of, no, those big offices are not going to be there. And, I'm not saying they're not going to have some nice stuff inside, but they might be a little smaller and not as many. And I think the law firms in the USA have never adopted the sharing office idea. They've never really done that, like accounting firms in the USA. I think you're going to start seeing that. I'll give you an example of how we're looking. Our leases right now don't come up for another few years. So we don't have much opportunity to redo our space. But in the USA, certainly, and I'm sure this is happening in the UK and various places, and it'll be happening in Latin America, I think, those who've got a lease on an office coming up in the next couple of years are going to be re-looking at what their renewal is going to be. Do they really need the big space, especially if you're in a city that's expensive? Or do you're going to do with less space because the lawyer's only going to be there a third of the time, etc. It's that sort of thinking that I think you definitely are going to see. I do think this event has created that situation. Because remember, in the Great Recession, it was a financial impact. We were still in our offices. We fired people, but they were still in our offices. It wasn't, oh, we've all now got to work from home. This is a pretty dramatic, because it's a health issue, this is a pretty dramatic event, never before seen. And I do think this will be a significant change. So if there's a focus on technology, it's got to be the technology that allows us to collaborate, talk to each other remotely as if we were in the office. One of my concerns from a risk management point of view is, will the quality of our work decisions on a client's problem be decreased because lawyer could get out of his office, walk 10 yards, right? 10 meters, go into another lawyer's office and bounce ideas, talk about an idea for their client, collaborate, get some input. that's not easy to do when you're remote. You can do it, of course. You can email, get on the phone. We forget we still have phones, but get on the phone. But the idea, but it's not going to be so easy. Will that impact the quality of the decisions we give our clients? That's some of the remote things, but definitely the technology drive, I don't think it's going to be on two areas. It will continue to be products that allow us to be efficient with our clients, no different than we were doing anyway, and we should all be doing. But secondarily, collaborative technology to allow us to talk together to each other, be closer to each other when we're in a remote mode. That, I think, is where you're going to see where we need to focus and do investments as well in the near term. And then there's a lot of issues to do with managing people remotely. The work they're doing, technology can allow that. We're going to use, we have our lawyers use a product for time entry. We know what and beneath that is another product. Every morning they can get a report of everything they touched yesterday, what document, what document they were in, what emails they touched, what phone calls they made, right? We're probably thinking we're going to use something like that on staff who are going to be permanently working remotely. So again, it's technology allowing us to connect. And I think that's why I say technology is going to take a bigger leap, but it might not be the leap in the direction we were talking all the time, like last November, in artificial intelligence. It's going to be just different software, that some of it's out there already. We adapt and change, and there'll be new products coming out to do all this stuff. So anyway, so we talked about space, culture of the firm is a big issue, we'll see. But I do think we're going to get this move to having people working remotely. And it's another issue. If clients get used to this remote environment, are they going to be more prone to really not care where their lawyer comes from? Are they going to be saying, well, actually, you know, I'm in Mexico City, and I've got my Mexico City law firm and they're good, I like them. But I know these two people, one's in London and one's in New York. They're qualified Mexico lawyers. They just happen to be there. And are they going to get more comfortable with just using lawyers wherever and not, you know, how they'd been using more of a firm prior? Do they get used to the virtual idea quicker than law firms? And as long as they get the work and etc. So suddenly there's a client now through this virtual movement, that the clients suddenly have all this talent available to them worldwide, literally, for their work. And, you know, there might be some jurisdiction issues, we know that. But it's an interesting question. Does that then put even more pressure on us, because we've been used to walking down the road and our client's 3 blocks away? And the client's now saying, that's nice, buy me a dinner occasionally, but I don't really care anymore. I don't care about that personal contact as much as in the past. So I'm using these guys out of London. They're great. They know exactly what I want. And it's all done virtually, and technology allows us to. So there's quite a lot of implications, I think, for us all in the future. So if I've got to say, you know, just winding up here, I know we have a few questions. What's my advice to firms and my own firm? Firstly, as I've mentioned, listen to your clients a lot in this strange period. Find out, help them as much as you can, but also find out what they think of the virtual approach. And maybe some of you are thinking, no, we're going to get back to the office. We're going to work exactly the same way as we did. And if that works for you, wonderful. But my gut feel is there's going to be a dramatic change. This event, this Black Swan event, I think will have more change in how we work and our relationships with clients than the 2008 recession. So as we look forward to the next few years, I think this issue of flexible working, remote working, folk taking the opportunity to allow that to allow you to reduce costs, and you should be able to do that with this model. You're going to have to be much better at technology. You're going to have to invest in technology. And it's not all fancy new AI. I mean, the word of AI, I think, is a bit well worn. You know, it's, we're seeing a lot of the standard products we've used for years now be a lot more usable because AI type programs are now embedded in that software. So it's not just new software, it's existing software where the clever software companies are actually embedding AI and making those products far more usable. Those products are going to have to be easily usable remotely to be effective in the future. And literally, you've got to have a system where if someone's working remotely, it's just like being in the office. They have the same look, they can do the same things, and they're going to have scanners in their home and stuff, right? I mean, it's a different change. So technology and understanding and spending money on technology, both from your own efficiency, effectiveness, continual improvement, plus being able to work seamlessly in a remote setup as well as, and move back and forth, I think is going to be needed. And when you're looking at strategic planning, is understand this has to be dynamic. You know, please don't, as I said before, I don't want to keep worrying about it. It's a sore point with me, but please don't keep doing 5-year plans. Though someone who did the 5-year plan last October, what does that look like now, right? Pretty much a waste of time. The goal now is, will we all be here next October, this coming October? That's what we're looking at. And then, again, technology, I only mentioned this. I showed this at the Modera conference. These are all the various areas of technology that are coming in. It continues, nothing's changed since October. All these tools are coming to us. They will continue to come to us. There's nothing changed really because we're remote. The issue is all these tools have to be also very easily available when we're working remote of when we're working in the office. That's the seamless, that is the one change to what's already been happening, I see COVID's bringing to us. And also, in the same vein, I showed this exhibit. All this was, as of last October, the best we could put together of all the major software, AI software that was coming to us, that people were selling us to be efficient, effective, to do all this stuff in law. It was a big number, and this list wasn't even the full number. Some of those have gone. Some of them are being priced out. They're really not doing what they thought, but others have replaced them. And this will continue. This, you know, COVID doesn't change this. The world of AI and what I call embedded AI will continue to come to law firms. But to me, that's all a plus because, as I say, technology is going to continue to dominate our life. And the sooner we all get to be comfortable and learn it, the better. Pick the software that's useful for your firm, obviously. But now we've got a different dimension. In my view, all this software we do now has to work, whether you're at home or whether suddenly you're in a hotel room in Guadalajara, or suddenly, in Guadalajara, I'm usually in a bar. So I mean, basically when I'm in a bar in Guadalajara, it has to work on my iPhone, on my iPad, on my laptop, and in the office. And that's where we're going. So whether flexible permanent to you or permanent flexible to those listening is, I'll be in the office 10% of the time and working remotely 90%, or whether I'm going to be in the office 90% and working remotely 10%, whatever, we're all going to be in the same boat. We need that seamless, flexible, technology-driven model for the future. And never mind discussing 10 years. If we talk about this a year from now, it might be different as well, the way things are going. So anyway, questions?
Jim, we ran out a little bit of time, But anyway, I think you've practically answered with your exposition the questions we had. I just want to give a little bit of a roundup for our audience. Definitely, I love this term you use of permanent flexibility. What I catch from what you're telling us is that the phenomenon that will mostly change the nature of how we operate is the home office part, is the being able to have this flexibility to sometimes reduce costs, not only sometimes even in people doing the stuff, but also in offices, in physical spaces, and invest more in equipping our people to be able to work at home, and also in the security part, and in softwares that allow us to collaborate and to assure in the leadership part that we can sort of replicate this interaction among our collaborators, no? So we definitely need to think about making our structures more leaner, more flexible. Sometimes we think that to expand our business, we need to hire more lawyers or to hire more equipment, no? And we also must take into consideration that right now hiring a new lawyer means also buying new equipment. It takes a lot of implications. So why not also collaborate, no? Maybe if you can close with this, with some message also. I think it's important to learn to collaborate with other lawyers, with other law firms, no? Not only think
Sure.
about building our infrastructure.
Yeah, we've where our situation is in San Diego, we have a very focused view of down into Mexico and Latin America. We've done collaboration with Mexico law firms in practice areas where we've worked together because clients cross-border. And I think that's something that's a whole separate discussion on cross-border collaboration and working together. I think that's technology allows that to be done much easier. And that's another aspect, I think, of technology. But I think the collaborative issue of being able to have software where we can easily talk to each other in a sophisticated, secure chat room, talk with our clients, pass documents back and forth is a way that is an area that's going to grow and we need to grow. So I just think that, you know, you've got to open your mind and be prepared to, you know, how we did things in the past might still continue in many areas. I'm not saying it's all going to go away, but we've got to be prepared. It is a different, and we have young lawyers who view differently anyway. And it's going to be an interesting sort of thing about the younger lawyers wanted to be work more remotely prior to COVID. Now they've got some examples and they've had some experience. We'll see what they say when we've been through this for a few months. But you know, I think the collaboration, not just the technology allows us to collaborate much better, and that's where we have to be able to have a much you know, improved future with technology, and it's just going to be different. And I think the threat to many of us is that on the one hand, that's great for us, we can collaborate with others, but it just means our clients can really reach out across continents to decide what lawyer to use if they really, and I see this as we're not sort of talking about it much, but you know, it's a sort of the other side of the equation, right? Is if our clients get so familiar with virtual and happy with it, they do have a bigger market to go to. And the technology allows us not just to do that ourselves, because we can expand our markets, collaborate more with our friends around, you know, Latin America, North America. But also, it definitely is a thing where I think you will find to do the same task, you do not need as many people in support. And that's an opportunity for us financially. And I just think that will happen. And you need to look at that to make sure you take advantage of all the opportunities that come out of this event. So, And, you know, there's a lot more to discuss. Obviously, this is evolving. Every month we see different things happening. So, as I say, watch this space.
Well, thank you, Jim, a lot for sharing your time with us, sharing your experience, your ideas, definitely very enriching for us, and the practical tips of what law firms could be doing and where they have to be thinking of investing, of shortening their costs. And it was great having you here. To all the audience, thank you for your time, for your attention. And I just leave you in the chat a link so that you can leave us your comments about this session, please. A little survey that we have each week. And I would just also, well, like to remind you that we have this digital forum every week. If you can see now on the screen, this is the agenda for this month. If you want to get connected, next week we have Maria de Jesus from the Innovation Institute in Spain. We have different topics this week. Also partnering with ANADE in doing a webinar once a week. So once you're already part of our list, you will be receiving each week a notification of the session of the week. So we just are generating interesting content that can help you in this new order digital transformation world for the legal sector. So thank you a lot again, Jim, and we hope to have you back in Mexico soon.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.